speaking of that, Mike Boynton, who we've kind of had his back. Of course, he got the raw deal with the NCAA. Everyone was mad at X, Y, and Z program, so they went ahead and put Oklahoma State on probation. So the Tulsa World had a story about Oklahoma State basketball as they've been floundering. They're not having a good year this year. They're 2-9. Bill Haston was the one that had written an article in the Tulsa World. Boynton contacted the Tulsa World, and here are some of the quotes from him. For everyone who wants me to be fired, that's fine. They can say your performance is not very good, your expected level, etc. They are well within their right to say that. They can hire Billy Donovan or Phil Jackson or the coach at Langston or whoever. But Oklahoma State's success in the Big 12 Conference will be difficult to achieve unless there is a strengthening commitment to name, image, and likeness resources for Cowboy basketball. He went on to say this as well. You're watching a lot of sports. You've watched a lot of sports. The teams with the better players, they're usually the ones who usually win. It's a simple rule of thumb. This is about talent acquisition and also retention. Boynton went on to say as well, I'm coming up on the end of my 7th season as head coach. What have you heard about the possibility of any significant upgrades for the men's basketball program in 7 years? And then finally, from Mike Boynton, listen to what he says here. I think most people are unwilling to accept that it's very different. I have never in 10 years, in my 19 years, had an issue with recruiting good players. He had Cade Cunningham, by the way. Ever. I've never had any kind of issue with building good relationships with kids and their families and getting kids buying into a vision. And then this thing at the end with the Big 12, without naming specific schools, I'll tell you what I know. There are at least 6 programs operating above $2 million in the Big 12 when it comes to their rosters.
Yeah.
And they're not doing, apparently, much of anything, facilities and or NIL. Now, that he's fighting for his job, and he might have just cut himself right there with what he's talking about, because if you're the AD at Oklahoma State, you're like, Weiberg, you're like, okay, all right.
Well, yeah, but if you haven't had anything and you're, look, Mark Stoops had to fight this battle. Heck, John Calipari fought this battle at Kentucky, even saying, like, we're a basketball school, and started a little turf war with Mark Stoops a couple years ago. But, yeah, Mike Boynton, look, if he hasn't gotten the stuff, if he's gotten something that he's leaving out, I'm sure they could say, like, well, we did this for you. But that doesn't seem to be the case. And, when you see, all right, Cade Cunningham, was his one and done kind of right before the NIL era started. And then when the NIL era started, they lost 3 or 4 guys over a couple seasons that were good, steady players. Were they Cade Cunninghams? No. But gosh, who is? There's not that many guys out there like him, but they lost some good and steady players to other programs because they couldn't match the NIL. So, yeah, I don't have any reason to believe that Mike Boynton's making all this up now because he's under the gun. But if you're going to ask him why he thinks they haven't made steps forward, he can speak what he believes is the truth and say, look, I don't think that we are winning the bidding wars.
If you're going down, go down fighting.
Yeah.
Go down with what you think is the truth, and whether or not that helps or not, I don't know.
How did they get Cade Cunningham? Did they just recruit him really well?
When he said Cade Cunningham, the first thing I thought about is I'm sure he didn't go to Oklahoma State for free.
Wasn't his brother on staff? Or his brother was connected.
He hired a family member and hired his brother and got him to commit after he had been on I guess the talk was he was going to Kentucky. So he had money then. I know the NCAA sanctions were unfair based on it felt like they were getting punished for other people's sins in some ways, but I don't know. I seem to vividly recall the whole Cade Cunningham situation. It seemed like the money was okay back then. Now, maybe I'm misremembering it. Our Oklahoma State fans can point out where that's incorrect or why that's a different situation. But, there's there's a guy who clearly feels his seat is blistering hot right now, because you don't say all of that if everything's hunky-dory. But there's a lot of passing the buck there as well. Of like, oh, well, everything's fine here. You guys just aren't giving me enough money to go pay players, is basically the message, right? So if that's the case, then I guess Oklahoma State has some onus for that. And if not, then I guess he's just basically signing his death sentence right now as far as being the Oklahoma State head coach. But, yeah, I mean, that's an Oklahoma State fan or administrator's prerogative that they can, fill us in on whether that's a statement that rings true or whether they are providing enough and he's just not getting the job done. But yeah, that's a lot of words and a lot of reasons as to why it's not working out, and I'm interested to hear how those have been received.
Well, we've always liked them, but they're not good. They're 2-9, and they get hit with the NCAA. I always thought they were pretty feisty, but they're worn down. No question right now, and most likely not going to be a part of the NCAA tournament unless they win the Big 12 tournament or an NIT.